but you still feel tired.
If you feel like your life is just this constant battle against a fundamental lack of energy, and you're, perpetually operating on maybe 40% battery, and that's for 3 cups of coffee, then you are absolutely in the right place. We are doing a deep dive today into the modern fatigue epidemic. And this isn't just about needing to hit the snooze button one more time. This pervasive chronic exhaustion has really become a defining characteristic of the 21st century. What our sources show is that this is no longer some kind of personal failing. It's a truly pervasive social and biological phenomenon. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to move way past that simple explanation you always hear, just sleep more or, drink more water.
Yeah.
We're going to examine the complex intertwined web of factors, biological, psychological, even sociological and technological, that all work together to keep us tired all the time.
It's so important to reframe this, because the real source of this weariness, it doesn't just lie in our bedrooms, it's everywhere else. I mean, it's in our pockets, it's in our offices, and it's in the fundamental cultural scripts we're all sort of forced to follow. So we're going to act as your guides today to map this all out. We'll be looking at the taxes modern life puts on the body, then the mind, and then the wider system we all live in.
That sounds like quite a journey. So let's start at that base level. Segment 1. The biological and lifestyle taxes on energy. And I guess we have to start with the biggest one, the most obvious biological factor, sleep debt. That accumulated deficit over days, weeks, that just leaves us chronically exhausted, even if we feel like we're sleeping mostly enough.
And that deficit, it often starts in the very last place you check before you turn off the lights for the night. We have to talk about blue light. Specifically, that narrow spectrum blue light that comes from all of our digital screens. That light, it profoundly suppresses the body's secretion of melatonin.
Right, melatonin, that's the hormone that basically tells your body it's time to transition to sleep.
Exactly. So when you expose your eyes to that blue light late at night, you're constantly sending a signal to your brain. The signal is daytime. You're essentially just confusing your internal clock, your circadian rhythm. And this interference means that even if you clock 7 or 8 hours in bed, you might be missing out on the really deep restorative stages, the NREM and REM sleep. That's where all the real physiological repair happens.
And what the research makes so clear is the cumulative effect of this. We're not just talking about one bad night here. It's about consistently losing, maybe 30 or 45 minutes of quality sleep.
Right.
Every single night.
Precisely. The key takeaway from the research here is that those small recurring deficits, they add up. They accumulate into chronic sleep debt. Think of it like a loan. You're constantly paying the minimum interest, but the principal, it just keeps growing. That fatigue becomes structural. It becomes part of your baseline, and you can't fix it with a single weekend lie-in. You might feel a little refreshed on Sunday morning, sure, but physiologically, you haven't really caught up.
Okay, so moving from the bed to the kitchen, we have to look at the fuel we're putting into the machine. I think most people get that sugar gives you energy, but the sources we looked at dive into the metabolic instability of modern diets.
It's the roller coaster effect. That's the best way to describe it. Modern diets rely so heavily on highly refined carbs and processed sugars. So you get that rapid spike as glucose floods your bloodstream, which causes this sharp insulin response to manage it all. But, what goes up must come down. And you get an inevitable, really dramatic hypoglycemic crash.
And that crash is what we feel as just being tired, right? We mistake it for normal fatigue.
Absolutely. That crash leaves you feeling sluggish, irritable, and suddenly starving again. And it forces this self-perpetuating cycle where you reach for another quick fix, another coffee, another sugary snack, just to get back up the hill. But that just sets you up for the next crash. It's like metabolic whiplash. You're constantly forcing your body to scramble for fuel.
And it's not just about the spikes and crashes, is it? It's also about what we're missing in the long term.
It's a crucial point. If we go down to the cellular level, this is where the engine actually runs. We need something called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. It's the fundamental energy currency of our cells. And deficiencies in crucial micronutrients, things like vitamin D, vitamin B12, iron, They severely impair your body's ability to manufacture that ATP efficiently. If you don't have enough B12 or iron, for instance, your energy production assembly line is just running at half speed. You are literally shortchanging your body's energy currency, and that leads to that systemic, low-grade fatigue that just never seems to go away.
So on top of shortchanging the engine, we're also running it perpetually in the red. I mean, that always-on feeling of stress, it just defines modern life.
You know, what's fascinating here is how the body adapts to this constant low-grade threat, this kind of chronic stress. It maintains the body in a prolonged state called allostasis. It's a protective adaptation mechanism. It's basically your body's attempt to maintain stability while it's under continuous pressure.
So it's kind of like having your car idling at super high RPMs all day long.
That's a perfect analogy. Your adrenal glands are constantly pumping out cortisol, the primary stress hormone. And cortisol is fantastic for acute threats, for running from a predator. But when it's chronically elevated, it is catastrophic for long-term energy. It depletes your core energy reserves. It starts interfering with your metabolism, even your thyroid hormones. And ultimately, the body just burns out. This constant hormonal taxation, that's the state people often call adrenal fatigue. It's real exhaustion, and it's driven by the stress system.
And finally, for this section, we need to address this really cruel paradox. The fact that sitting all day, doing almost nothing physically, somehow makes you more tired than if you were actually moving.
It sounds so counterintuitive, but it really just boils down to efficiency. A lack of regular, varied movement makes the body far less efficient at both making and distributing energy. When you sit for prolonged periods, your blood circulation slows right down. And that means your cells, especially your brain cells, they're not getting enough oxygen. And without oxygen, your mitochondria, the little power plants inside your cells, they can't properly make ATP. So that sluggishness, that brain fog, that heavy feeling you get in the afternoon, that's the direct result of cellular energy deprivation, all because of stagnation. Movement is literally required to keep the power plants running efficiently.
It's fascinating how many biological levers modern life is pulling to keep us tired. So that covers the body. Now let's move upstairs. Segment 2. The cognitive overload, the burden on the mind. And here's where it gets really interesting because this is such a silent drain on our energy.
It's silent. And it is immense. We're looking at the sheer volume of stimuli our brains have to process every single day. The 24/7 news cycle, the endless social media feed, the constant torrent of work messages. We are living in an age of information saturation, which, inevitably leads to what researchers call cognitive overload.
And our brains are just running hot all the time trying to manage this influx of information.
And the primary culprit for the fatigue this creates is something called context switching. And the attention residue that results from it, think about it. Every single time you switch tasks, you're writing a report, a Slack message pops up, you check it, then you go back to the report, your brain has to totally reconfigure itself. But here's the kicker. A part of your mind, the attention residue, it remains fixed on that previous task.
Oh, so even though I'm back to reading the report, a fraction of my brain power is still in the background thinking about that Slack message.
Exactly. That fraction of your resources that stays dedicated to the old email or the social media post, it's constantly consuming energy. And it diminishes the focus you have available for your current task. It's like leaving a dozen small programs running in the background of your computer. They'll just chip away at the processing power. This cognitive fragmentation is intensely draining. It makes true, deep work almost impossible without feeling exhausted after just an hour or so.
That explains so much. It explains why I can spend an entire day working and feel utterly wiped out, but have almost nothing tangible to show for it. And then on top of that, you add the exhaustion that comes from just the sheer overwhelming number of choices we have to make.
That is the insidious fatigue known as decision fatigue. Psychologists have highlighted that every single small choice, from deciding how to word a specific email, to figuring out what to order for lunch, to choosing which of the 50 streaming options you're going to click on tonight, it all draws down from the exact same limited mental resource pool.
So we're spending all our energy on these micro decisions before we even get to the big ones.
Precisely. And as that decision-making resource gets depleted, the quality of your next decisions degrades. This is why, highly successful people like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg famously wore the same thing every day to eliminate those minor decisions. For the rest of us, this depletion leads to mental paralysis, that feeling of, I just can't even think. And it often leads to impulsivity, like choosing that quick high sugar energy fix we talked about earlier, because your willpower is just too low to resist anymore.
And if we tie this mental fatigue into social pressure, we get to the crushing weight of comparison culture.
Oh, absolutely. Social media has institutionalized comparison culture. There's no escaping it. We are constantly confronted with these curated, idealized versions of other people's lives. And this generates this intense pressure to perform, to maintain a facade of success, of constant productivity, and what people now call toxic positivity.
Right. The idea that we must always be fine, always succeeding, always, leveling up.
And the mental cost of keeping that facade up is huge. This relentless pursuit of the hustle culture ideal, this idea that if you're resting, you're failing. It requires enormous emotional and mental labor, generates chronic anxiety and this pervasive existential weariness. It's just exhausting to pretend to be perfect all the time. The mind never, ever gets to relax and simply be.
It really sounds like we're stuck in a machine that's optimized for speed and output, which brings us perfectly to segment 3, the systemic and sociological drivers. And these are factors they're structural. They're not things we can just fix with a good night's sleep. I mean, the expectation of being always on, thanks to mobile communication, it has fundamentally just eroded the line between our work life and our private life.
That's absolutely right. Work is no longer a place you go. It's a thing you do constantly. The constant possibility of receiving an urgent notification, whether it's 8 p.m. on a Tuesday or 6 a.m. on a Sunday, it prevents the mind from ever truly entering a restorative state. You're always tethered. This systemic lack of true downtime prevents the default mode network, or DMN, from activating properly. And that's the brain network that's crucial for internal processing, memory consolidation, and deep creativity.
The DMN is the network that kicks in when we let our minds wander, right? Like when we're daydreaming or just doing something mindless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's where the brain takes all the information you gathered during the day and it processes it. It turns experiences into memories. It sparks new connections. If you constantly interrupt that process with external stimulus, checking an email, scrolling social media, you prevent the DMN from doing its restorative work. And the result is shallow processing, poor memory, and yes, fatigue. The workday isn't 8 hours anymore. It's this indeterminate period that only ends when physical sleep forces a halt.
And culturally, we've managed to make being busy a badge of honor.
This is a really powerful societal myth. We've conflated being busy with being productive. And this frames necessary rest as laziness or, a lack of ambition. If you're not exhausted, you must not be trying hard enough. This structural pressure leads directly to what researchers now call time poverty, where individuals just lack the free time that's necessary for non-instrumental activities.
Non-instrumental activities. So that means doing things purely for enjoyment, not to achieve some goal, like sitting and listening to music or watching a cloud float by.
Precisely. Activities that fill the soul but don't fill the calendar. When you're constantly prioritizing work or instrumental tasks like chores or errands, the emotional and mental reserves that come from pure enjoyment, they just slowly drain away. This is a really quiet but profound form of fatigue.
Okay, let's talk about the factor that is probably the hardest to fix because it hits closest to home for so many people: economic precarity.
Yeah. If we really connect this to the bigger picture, a lot of chronic tiredness is fundamentally rooted in economic insecurity. Job precarity, stagnant wages, high housing costs, systemic debt. All of this translates into persistent, grinding financial stress. The necessity of working multiple jobs just to stay afloat, or the constant fear of losing your job, is the most profound, energy-draining form of sociological stress there is.
So that anxiety about basic survival just keeps the cortisol pumping even when you're physically supposed to be resting.
That is the very definition of the allostatic load we discussed earlier, but it's applied systemically. It's stressed about survival, and it completely overwhelms the body's ability to recover. You really can't biohack your way out of poverty or job insecurity.
And finally, even our physical surroundings are draining our energy reservoirs without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. The urban landscape is a huge contributor to what you could call environmental fatigue. Take urban noise pollution, for example. Constant noise from traffic, sirens, construction. It interferes with your sleep quality even when you think you're asleep. And it raises your baseline stress levels during the day. Similarly, exposure to air pollution has been linked to inflammation throughout the body, which costs energy for your body to manage.
And what about nature? We all kind of instinctively know that being outside helps.
That's the lack of biophilia. Insufficient exposure to nature is a subtle but incredibly powerful factor. Exposure to nature is scientifically known to reduce cortisol levels and improve cognitive function. It essentially gives your brain a much-needed break. When you live in a dense concrete jungle and you lack that green space, that really important pathway for psychological recovery it's cut off.
Wow. This has been a pretty heavy dive into all the complex causes of exhaustion. But we're not going to leave you there. Let's shift our focus to segment 4, strategies for restoration. And the key insight here, I think, is that energy is something we have to protect rather than just trying to add more through external things, like another coffee.
And the first crucial step is digital hygiene and attention protection. We have to recognize the fundamental difference between true restoration and what's just low-effort leisure, like endless scrolling. Scrolling is often just cognitive maintenance. It's not rest. This involves establishing what we call digital sundowns.
Okay, define that for us. What's a digital sundown?
A digital sundown is a strict non-screen period, ideally maybe 60 to 90 minutes before you go to bed. You need to physically remove the light source that's suppressing your melatonin, and you need to remove the stimulus that fragments your attention. The goal here is just regaining control of your attention, creating it as the finite and valuable resource that it is, and preventing that constant last-minute stimulation.
So instead of trying to just push through the exhaustion, we need to weave strategic recovery into our actual day.
Correct. We have to manage our cognitive load proactively. Techniques like the Pomodoro technique, focused 25-minute bursts of work followed by short, non-digital breaks, can help compartmentalize tasks and allow for micro-recovery. But crucially, those breaks have to be truly restorative. They have to allow the DMN to activate. You need to do simple things. Mindful breathing, getting up to stretch, or just looking out the window rather than automatically checking a social feed or an email. You have to let your mind wander for a moment.
So what does this all mean for the bigger picture? Because, as we said, systemic issues require systemic solutions. We can't fix all this just through personal willpower.
Absolutely not. This requires real corporate and legislative change. The sources we looked at advocate for workplace cultures that prioritize outcomes over hours and that explicitly value boundaries. The most powerful intervention that was cited is legislation like the right to disconnect, which restores that fundamental boundary between work and personal life by, say, prohibiting employers from contacting employees after stipulated hours. That kind of system-wide change is what guarantees physiological and psychological recovery time for everyone.
And while we're pushing for those broader changes, we still have to return to those foundational health pillars for ourselves.
These are the non-negotiables. They're what bias the resilience to deal with everything else. Number 1, consistent high-quality sleep. You need a dark, quiet, cool room to facilitate that deep NREM and REM restoration. 2, foundational nutrition. A diet that's rich in whole, unprocessed foods to reduce that metabolic sugar roller coaster. And 3, regular moderate exercise. This is the paradox. Again, exerting energy in the short term actually increases your long-term energy by improving cellular efficiency, blood flow, and ATP production.
So, chronic fatigue, it turns out, is the incredibly complex symptom of a hyper-connected, hyper-competitive world that's been optimized for speed and constant productivity, often at the direct expense of our own human biology.
And to move beyond this perpetual weariness, we have to collectively shift the cultural narrative. Rest is not a luxury. It's not a reward for working hard. It is a non-negotiable biological requirement that underpins all productivity and all creativity. The solution demands both our own individual discipline in establishing digital and personal boundaries, and also that broader collective advocacy for a more human-centric pace of life.
And here's
Feeling tired is not always a problem. Sometimes it's a message. A message that says, slow down, change something, or take better care of yourself. Big energy doesn't come from big changes. It comes from small habits done every day. Thanks for listening. Take care of your energy. It's more valuable than you think.